The alarm rang at 6, but Anna was already awake. She stared at the ceiling for a moment before getting out of bed, the cool wooden floor greeting her feet. The house was still wrapped in a silence that felt almost too heavy for morning. She walked into the kitchen and started the coffee maker. The familiar smell filled the air, but it didn't bring the comfort it once did. For years, mornings had been different. There had been voices, laughter, the rush of getting her son ready for school. Ethan used to talk nonstop about his dreams, his friends, his plans to change the world. Anna used to tell him to hurry up, to eat faster, to not forget his backpack. Now, the table sat clean and empty, only one cup beside her. Ethan had left for college a month ago. And though she had told everyone she was fine, her heart hadn't yet caught up with that truth. She scrolled through her phone, looking at the pictures he'd sent. He looked happy, confident, free. That was all she had ever wanted for him. Still, a small ache sat inside her chest, quiet but constant. She missed the sound of his footsteps running down the stairs, the late-night talks when he couldn't sleep, the way he'd hug her just before leaving for school. Her husband Mark had already left for work. He always did. Their schedules barely touched these days. When he came home, it was late. When she was ready to talk, he was tired. They shared polite words, talked about bills, about groceries, about small things that filled the space between them. But the warmth that once made their marriage feel alive had slowly faded. Not because of anger, but because of time. Life had turned love into routine. Anna looked out the window. The sun had begun to rise, painting the neighborhood in soft gold. She watched the neighbor's dog run across the lawn, chasing a stick. A few kids waited for the school bus. She smiled faintly. It all looked peaceful, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing, not just in her day, but in her life. After breakfast, she packed away the dishes and opened her laptop. She worked part-time from home as a freelance designer, a job she had taken to stay close to her son when he was younger. Now it just filled her hours. She answered emails, fixed a few layouts, and sipped her coffee, but her focus drifted. Her eyes caught the small notes stuck to her Walethan's old doodles, reminders of science fairs and birthdays. They made her smile, but also made her heart ache. By noon, she stepped outside to get some air. The early fall breeze brushed her face, carrying the smell of rain. She looked across the street and noticed the moving truck. Someone new had bought the old Thompson house, the one that had been empty for months. Boxes lined the driveway. A man was unloading furniture with quiet focus. He looked to be in his late 30s, maybe early 40s tall, with a presence that drew attention without trying. Anna watched for a moment, then turned away, feeling oddly self-conscious. She walked to her garden, trimming the small flowers along the fence. Gardening always calmed her, even when her thoughts were loud. She had just started pulling weeds when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Hey, Mom, I miss you. But don't worry, I'm doing great." She smiled, reading the words again and again. She typed back quickly, "I'm proud of you, sweetheart. Call me soon." Then she slipped her phone back into her pocket, blinking away a few quiet tears. The afternoon passed slowly. The house creaked as if remembering busier days. The sound of the clock echoed in the empty rooms. Anna decided to bake something she hadn't done in a while. She mixed flour and sugar, her hands moving out of habit. The smell of cookies filled the kitchen, and for a second she imagined Ethan walking in, asking for one before they cooled. The memory felt so real it hurt. Mark called around 5. "I'll be late tonight," he said, his voice distracted. She told him okay, even though she already knew. She didn't ask why. He didn't offer an explanation. After the call, she sat by the window again, her cup of tea warm in her hands. Outside, the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. The moving truck was gone now, but the man from earlier stood on his porch looking at the view. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the quiet street. He nodded politely, and she returned the gesture before turning away. It was nothing, a simple exchange between neighbors, but it lingered in her mind longer than it should have. When night came, the house felt too big. She turned on a lamp in the living room and wrapped a blanket around herself. The TV played softly in the background, but she barely listened. Her thoughts wandered to her family, to her choices, to the woman she used to be. She had once been full of plans and dreams. Somewhere along the way, she had traded them for stability, for being needed. Now, with her son grown and her husband distant, she wasn't sure who she was outside of being a mother and a wife. The clock struck 9. The wind picked up outside, brushing against the windows. Anna closed her eyes, resting her head on the couch. She thought of Ethan's laugh, of Mark's first smile when they met years ago, of the way life had once felt like an open road. She wasn't unhappy, just uncertain before going to bed. She walked into her son's room. Everything was still the same, the trophies, the posters, the books. She touched one of his shirts hanging by the door, holding it for a moment. The smell of laundry detergent and faint cologne made her chest tighten. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered, even though he wasn't there to hear it. She turned off the light and stood for a moment in the doorway, looking at the darkened room. Then she went back to her own, the sound of the wind filling the silence as she lay down. She thought about how quickly everything had changed. A few months ago, her life had been full of noise and movement. Now it was still like the pause between two songs. But in that stillness, something small began to stir, a quiet awareness that her story wasn't over. It was only changing. Anna didn't know what awaited her next. She only knew that something inside her had started to wake up again, the part that still wanted to feel alive, to be seen. To rediscover the woman she had once been before, the world called her only one name. Mom. It was a Thursday morning. Gray and cool, the kind of day that felt slow from the start. Anna grabbed her purse and keys, ready to run a few errands before her afternoon calls. When she stepped outside, the air smelled like rain, and the street was quiet except for a few cars in the distance. She got into her car, turned the key, and nothing happened. The engine made a weak sound, then silence. She tried again, tapping the steering wheel, whispering a small prayer. But the car refused to start. She sighed and stepped out, checking under the hood, though she knew nothing about engines. That's when she heard a calm voice behind her. "Need some help?" Startled, she turned around and saw the man from across the street, the one who had moved in a few weeks earlier. He was holding a toolbox, wearing a faded gray sweatshirt and jeans. His hair was slightly messy, his expression kind but steady. "Oh, hi," she said, brushing her hair from her face. "I think it's the battery. Or maybe it just gave up on me." He smiled slightly. "Let's take a look." He leaned over the engine with quiet confidence, checking wires and parts like someone who actually knew what he was doing. Anna stood beside him, feeling both awkward and oddly comforted by his calmness. He worked without talking much, only asking once for her to try the ignition again. The engine sputtered and then roared back to life. "There," he said, closing the hood. "Battery's fine for now, but you might need a new one soon. They don't last forever." Anna let out a relieved laugh. "Neither do we, apparently." He chuckled. "True enough." She thanked him, and he waved it off like it was nothing. "I'm Daniel, by the way," he said, wiping his hands with a small towel. "Just moved in last month." "I'm Anna," she replied. "Welcome to the neighborhood." They exchanged a few light words about the weather and the quiet street before he went back home. It was a short moment, simple, polite, but as Anna drove away, she caught herself smiling. There was something about him that felt calm, genuine. Over the next few days, they crossed paths, often at the mailbox, near the grocery store, walking their respective errands. Each time their conversations grew a little longer. Daniel talked about his work as a landscape architect, how he loved creating peaceful spaces for people to escape busy lives. Anna shared small bits about her freelance work and her son's college adventures. Neither asked personal questions, yet their words always lingered with warmth. One afternoon, while she was trimming her garden, Daniel walked over holding a cup of coffee. "I figured you might need a break," he said, handing it to her. She laughed softly. "You read my mind." They sat on the porch steps, sipping coffee as the wind moved gently through the trees. The conversation flowed easily, touching on small things, music, books, the quiet beauty of their neighborhood. Anna hadn't realized how long it had been since someone listened to her without distraction, without checking their phone or rushing to speak. Daniel listened, really listened, as if her words mattered. At one point, she mentioned how strange it felt having her son away for the first time. "The house feels too big now," she admitted. He nodded thoughtfully. "It's hard when the noise goes quiet. You start hearing your own thoughts again." Anna smiled faintly. "That's exactly it." They both sat in silence for a while, watching a few leaves fall onto the street. There was comfort in that stillness, the kind that didn't need to be filled with words. That evening, Anna told herself it was. The days grew shorter, and the evenings carried that quiet chill that comes before winter. Anna's routine stayed the same: coffee in the morning, work at her laptop, a walk through her garden. Then long silent dinners waiting for Mark to come home. But something inside her had changed. She didn't fully understand it. Yet she could feel it every time she looked out the window and saw Daniel across the street. They still spoke often, though always casually. Sometimes he'd wave when mowing his lawn or stop to ask about her garden. Other times he'd just nod, offering a quiet smile before returning to his work. Their friendship was simple, respectful, and unspoken, but beneath that still surface, something deeper was beginning to grow. One Friday evening, dark clouds rolled over the neighborhood. The wind rattled the trees and rain started to fall in heavy sheets. Mark had texted earlier that he'd be staying late at the office again. Anna wasn't surprised, but she couldn't help the familiar sting that came with that message. She turned off the lights and sat near the window, listening to the storm. The rain blurred the world outside, streetlights glowing like soft halos through the mist. Across the street, she could see Daniel standing under his porch light, watching the same rain. His hands were in his pockets, his expression calm but distant, like someone lost in thought. Their eyes met through the curtain of water. Neither moved, yet that silent glance carried more emotion than words ever could. Anna turned away quickly, her heart beating faster than it should. She told herself it was just the weather, just loneliness, just imagination. But deep down, she knew it was something more: a quiet ache that came from being seen when she hadn't realized how invisible she had felt. The next day, the storm cleared. The sky was bright and the air felt clean. Anna went outside to pick up a few fallen branches from her yard. Daniel was there too, sweeping water from his driveway. "Looks like the storm made a mess," he said, glancing her way. "It did," she replied with a small smile. "But sometimes a mess reminds you what needs fixing." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "That's true." They talked for a while about small things, safe things. Yet even in those simple exchanges there was a weight, something unspoken that neither dared to name. Before he went back inside, Daniel hesitated and said softly, "If you ever need help with anything, you know where I am." That night, Anna sat on her couch, turning his words over in her mind. She thought of her life, how steady and predictable it had become. Mark had always been a good man, reliable, honest. Hardworking, but somewhere along the years their connection had thinned like paper left in the sun. There were no fights, no betrayals, just distance. They lived side by side, but rarely met in the middle anymore. As she watched the clock tick past 10, she realized she hadn't felt truly understood in years. And that was what scared her most: not the loneliness, but how normal it had begun to feel. Sunday morning came bright and cool. Anna went for a walk to clear her head. The streets were quiet, the leaves scattered like gold across the sidewalks. She ended up near the park at the edge of town, where children played and couples walked hand in hand. Watching them stirred something deep inside her. Mixture of nostalgia and longing. She found herself thinking about Daniel again. About how easy it was to talk to him. About how he made her laugh without trying. About how, when she looked at him, she saw a reflection of her own quiet sadness as she turned to head home. Her phone buzzed. It was Mark. Just checking in, his text read. She stared at it for a long moment, then replied, "Hope your day's good." He didn't respond. When she reached her house, she saw something on her porch, a small envelope tucked under a potted plant. Her name was written on it in neat handwriting. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a short note. "Thank you for always being kind. The world needs more hearts like yours." There was no signature, but she didn't need one. She knew it was from Daniel. Her hands trembled slightly as she folded the note back. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't even personal really, but it felt more meaningful than any words she'd heard in months. Someone had noticed her, not for what she did, but for who she was that evening. She cooked dinner for two out of habit, though she knew Mark wouldn't make it home until late. The kitchen smelled of roasted herbs and garlic. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat at the table, staring at the empty chair across from her. For a long moment she considered calling Mark, asking if he'd be home soon. But the thought of another distracted conversation made her stop. Instead, she picked up Daniel's note again and read it slowly. Kind. The word echoed in her mind. She realized it had been a long time since anyone had described her that way. Later that night, as she walked past her window, she noticed Daniel's house again. The light in his living room was on, casting a warm glow against the dark. He was sitting at a small table, writing something. She watched for a moment, then turned away, feeling a strange mix of comfort and confusion. Over the next few days, Anna tried to focus on work, but her thoughts wandered. She avoided looking out the window too often, yet her eyes always found his porch anyway. When she saw him, they would smile, wave, and go about their day. Nothing more. Still, the awareness of his presence lingered like a quiet hum beneath everything she did. One evening, she was walking home from the grocery store when Daniel drove by and stopped. "Need a lift?" he asked through the open window. She hesitated, but smiled. "Sure, thanks." The short drive was filled with light conversation music, whether the new coffee shop in town. But the air between them carried something neither wanted to name. When he pulled up to her driveway, she thanked him and opened the door. "Anytime," he said. His tone was calm, but his eyes held a softness that made her heart twist. Inside the house, Anna leaned against the door, taking a deep breath. She wasn't falling in love. She knew that. But she was remembering something she had almost forgotten, the quiet excitement of being noticed, of being understood without needing to explain. That night, rain began to fall again. She sat by the window, watching the droplets race down the glass. Across the street, Daniel stood on his porch once more, watching this same storm. Their eyes met for just a second before he turned away and went inside. Winter arrived quietly, covering the town in soft gray skies and cold winds. Anna had always liked this time of year, the calmness, the slower pace, but this winter felt different. The days moved forward, yet something inside her felt paused, like a story waiting for its ending. It had been weeks since that rainy night when she and Daniel had exchanged that unspoken look. Since then, their paths had crossed less. He was busy with work. She was busy pretending not to notice. Mark, on the other hand, had started coming home earlier. Maybe he sensed the quiet distance between them, or maybe he just missed the warmth of their old rhythm. He'd bring her flowers sometimes or ask if she wanted to watch a movie together. Anna appreciated the effort. It reminded her of the man she'd first fallen in love with years ago. But still, something between them had changed in ways that neither of them could put into words. It wasn't anger or disappointment. It was more like a gap built from years of silence. One evening, as snow began to fall, Anna sat by the window, watching the lights shimmer on the icy street. Her son Ethan had called earlier, full of energy and new stories about college. He was thriving, and that made her proud. Yet after she hung up, the quiet returned. She glanced across the street and saw Daniel's house, dark, quiet, untouched by movement. She hadn't seen him in days. A small ache tugged at her heart. That night, unable to sleep, she sat at her desk with a blank piece of paper in front of her. Without really deciding to, she began to write. The pen moved easily, like her heart had been waiting for this moment. Dear Daniel, I don't know why I'm writing this or if you'll ever read it. I just need to say thank you for seeing me, even when I forgot how to see myself. You reminded me that kindness still exists. That connection can come softly and still change everything. She paused, staring at the words. The sound of the clock filled the room. You didn't do anything wrong. You were just there. You helped me remember what warmth feels like, what it means to be heard. I won't forget that she signed her name but didn't seal the envelope. She sat there for a long time, thinking about how a simple friendship had stirred something she hadn't realized was missing. It wasn't love not in the way people talk about it, but it was real, and it mattered. She placed the letter in her drawer and turned off the light. Days passed. The snow deepened, blanketing everything in silence. One morning, as Anna shoveled her driveway, she noticed Daniel loading boxes into his truck. Her heart dropped a little. She walked over, wrapping her scarf tighter against the cold. "You're moving?" she asked. He nodded, smiling gently. "Yeah, new job offer in Seattle. It's sudden, but it feels like the right move." Anna forced a small smile. "That's wonderful. I'm happy for you." He looked at her with a quiet sincerity that made her chest tighten. "I'll miss this place. It's peaceful here, and the people have been kind." "Some of them," she said softly, and they both smiled. There was a short silence, heavy but not uncomfortable. Then Daniel reached into his coat pocket and handed her a small potted plant. "A little something for your porch. Thought you might like it." She looked down at the plant, a tiny green shoot in a clay pot, tied.